everybody, and welcome to the show. This week on Eggs, we have special guest Joe Sullivan. Joe is an industrial marketing consultant with more than 10 years experience and the co-founder of St. Louis-based industrial marketing agency Gorilla 76. Gorilla helps mid-sized B2B manufacturers identify, attract, engage, and drive sales opportunities with ideal fit customers. They make this happen through a combination of positioning, content marketing, SEO, website development, account-based marketing, and sales enablement. In addition to co-leading the agency, Joe serves as the company business development lead and consults Gorilla's clients on both sales and marketing strategy. Here to discuss all that and more, join me in welcoming our guest, Joe Sullivan. Hey, Joe, how are you?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course. Thanks so much for making the time for us. We're glad to have you here. I guess to kind of kick off our conversation, let's talk a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and what you do.
Sure. So you kind of nailed it as far as the company goes in the intro, but at a personal level, so I wound up in St. Louis for college, graduated in 2005 and from Milwaukee originally, and met my wife briefly, or kind of shortly after graduating, and found out years later that St. Louis girls never leave St. Louis. And so here I am. But yeah, I founded the agency with my business partner, John. He came from a journalism background. I came from more of a visual communications, design type of background. And so we had complementary skill sets, both getting into the advertising world, which is really where we started. So we each worked at different agencies here in St. Louis to start our careers. And within a couple of years, we kind of got to a place where the nights and weekends were made up of, a second full-time job. And we built a little client base and said, all right, I think now's the time. We can pay ourselves for a few months. And we were 24 at the time without too many responsibilities out there. So we made the leap and have slowly built our agency since. So we're 18 people now, and it was probably 7 or 8 years ago where we really sort of looked at who our best clients were, where we were able to produce the best results, the type of work we like doing, and said we're gonna own this industrial marketing thing and make manufacturers our specialty.
So can you give us a little background on the name, what Gorilla 76 stands for?
Yeah. So my first answer is we were a couple of 24-year-old guys who didn't know what we were doing and naming our company. But the Gorilla is sort of a nod to the other spelling of gorilla, like the idea of guerrilla marketing, which is derived from guerrilla warfare. And the idea that, in our earliest days, it was kind of, taking checks from whoever would write one and trying to figure out how to take a little budget with the dentist down the street this way and the hair salon down the street this way and making something out of nothing, getting the message in front of the right people and creating some impact. So we really were sort of inspired by that idea of guerrilla marketing early on. So we, and then the 76 comes from 7th month of 2006, which is when we sort of officially founded the company. So not the best story, but it has some roots. So
it works. Ryan
right.
actually has, Ryan was going to do something with guerrilla marketing a while ago. Was it Guerrilla Guides you were doing?
Yeah, I had grand intentions of writing a series of books called Guerrilla Guides.
Oh, cool.
Were, Gorilla, the other gorilla.
Yeah.
But yeah, same idea. Like I think that sort of idea, especially with people, it seems like maybe about our age, this idea of sort of guerrilla marketing and a guerrilla approach to market, doing everything kind of bootstrappy and stuff like that is sort of, I don't know, something popular in our demographic or sort of in our age.
Yeah, I think so.
So I think we grew up around that. Yeah. So I guess maybe to help people understand, how you might differ from a traditional agency, can you talk a little bit about, just quickly about the difference between marketing for B2B manufacturers versus other organizations?
And how did you hone in on that? How did you guys decide to go that route?
Sure. So I'll start with the second question and then work backwards. But what we sort of found, it was, I think 7 or 8 years ago, we kind of just, it sort of just happened where we sort of looked at our customer base, and we really liked working with, working on the creative work, but also the strategic work, working with sort of grittier brands, companies who made things with their hands, and it just sort of fit our personalities. We found that we could make the most impact for them. The manufacturing sector in general is just really far behind on the marketing front. And they really still are. There's just a lot of opportunity there to help companies take major steps forward. And so when we recognized that, we said, all right, let's, we already work with some companies here. We like working with them. Let's just own it. So we sort of just fell into it. There are other companies that would be considered industrial marketing agencies that, they started as engineers and then figured out how to do marketing. We're marketing guys who developed an expertise working with so many manufacturers. So kind of fell into it that way. And as far as, Ryan, how to answer your question about the difference between, say, the type of marketing we do and with our audience versus maybe more traditional methods or for other types of companies, I think what's at the core of the way we approach marketing is we try to work with companies who are deep experts in something. What they sell is not a commodity product or a sort of a widget off the shelf, but it's often a really complex, customized solution. They're often selling to a committee of buyers that sort of influence the buying process. That their customers tend to be, engineers, plant managers, procurement people, C-suite. And so the sale is really complex. And it's as a result of all this, it's their knowledge and sort of expertise inside of their brains that can serve to sort of help position them as a guide for their customers in their buying process. So when you think about content marketing or thought leadership content, I think that's really become the core of what we do is help extract the knowledge from our clients, experts, turn it into content that'll help them get found by the right people when they're out there Google searching, answers to questions or problems they're experiencing. But that content can also be used to, proactively distribute to the right people from the right companies through a variety of means. So.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that helps. One thing you touched on in there that I think is particularly interesting is this idea of sort of deep expertise. And I wonder, like, as an agency, and, you guys have niched down to the set in the sense that you're working for all manufacturers and things like that. But how do you guys as a team develop deep understanding of your client's specific industry? Like you mentioned at the top, these guys are building things with their hand. These are craftspeople. These are people that have really figured out really highly technical things. How do you develop deep enough levels of learning or understanding so that you can competently go out and market on their behalf?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think it's really easy it's not easy, but a lot of marketers kind of just fake it, right?
Sure.
It's just sort of the natural thing to do. But I think the way to be successful is, you have to start with strategy and you have to understand and learn from the right people at inside of these companies. So, for us, just process wise, for example, our earliest conversations with clients are, we tend to be full day workshops where we get the president of the company, the VP of sales, a few key salespeople, maybe some technical professionals, the people who interface with the customers and know them the best and know the ins and outs of their businesses and the problems they're experiencing. And we kind of just are sponges. We soak all that stuff up. And I think that's what you have to do. If you're an agency or a marketer marketing on behalf of another company, or if you're, say, a new internal marketing person, you've got to talk to the people who understand and interface with the customers. So I think there's that. And then when we get into actually doing the work, a lot of the content that we produce is written content. It's long form written educational content. And we've found the best way to do this is to go through this knowledge extraction process where you identify the subject matter experts inside of the company. And then, we have 4 writers in-house, for example, that are journalists. They come from journalism backgrounds. They know how to research. They know how to ask questions. They know how to pull the insights out of the brains of people who, like engineers who would never sit there and write a 1,500-word article about, educating on something super technical. It's not what they do. But so I think the marketer has to be the facilitator more than anything.
Yeah. So, in that initial consult, I was actually listening to another podcast you were on where you broke down the fact that you actually charge for that initial consult. You don't do it for free. And I like that concept. Can you maybe break that down for us, why that's the case?
Sure. Yeah. And this concept, I think, applies for any type of business that has sort of a knowledge product, right? So if you're a consultant in professional services, if you are a manufacturer who does a whole bunch of engineering work prior to the implementation of a big solution, if you're a marketer or a salesperson and you're trying to figure out a strategy for somebody before implementing it, it only makes sense to me that you would separate that first strategic engagement from the bigger engagement. And so to give you context, the way we do it, we have this process that we call the industrial marketing roadmap. And basically what it is we start by providing a discovery survey to the new client. They spend some time sort of filling that out and getting the one-on-one stuff out of the way. We collect that a week prior to a half-day workshop with sort of the people I described a few minutes ago, the head of the company, head of sales, marketing, a few technical professionals. We spent a half day with them sort of breaking down, going deeper on that discovery survey, understanding their customers, what their customers care about, opportunities, challenges they have, what's been successful in the past, what hasn't, painting a picture of all this. And then we leave that consultation, and over the next 2 weeks, we conduct some research. We look at the opportunities online. We do keyword research for them. We figure out look at what their competitors are doing well and not doing well. And we essentially put together a written plan that says, okay, to be successful and to accomplish what you've told us you need to accomplish at a business level, but also at a sales and marketing level, this is what we think you need to do. And we lay that out for them, and we give them different options for implementation. If you hired us to do it, here's how we do it and what you'd probably spend. If you did it yourself, here's how we would do it given the internal resources you have. And so, this is a process for us. For example, we charge $5,000 for that process. It's a flat fee. We do it the same way every time. We know this process works and sets people up for success, but they don't have to, make some massive investment to go in and do this. So it accomplishes a lot of things. It helps build trust both ways, right? It helps establish a fit, and it gives them a plan that they can then run with and really, do what they want with. So
by having that initial $5,000 fee, do you find that helps your close rate? Because they're not going to go in and do that initial payment if they are not serious about it in the first place. I'm sure that really helps kind of weed out the people who are just wasting your time.
Exactly. That's exactly what happens. I think about the way we used to operate a few years ago, and it was, we would still go through this discovery process with the client, but it was all to win the job. And, we were trying to win the big long-term retainer engagement with the client that was going to, pay us some large fee monthly over the course of a year and hopefully turn into a long-term client. And, but it's a lot to ask of someone to make that kind of commitment. And of course we're going to have to put in a lot of work to prove that, we're capable and can get them where they want to go. And so we'd find ourselves 40 hours into, essentially a pitch, right? And maybe we'd win half of them. But now I have a first conversation with somebody. It takes 30 minutes to have that conversation. And I say, okay, here's our process. I'm going to send you a PDF that outlines it. It's canned. But this is the first step we go through. It's the same for everybody. And then, some people I never hear from again, but a lot of them, they say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Let's do this as a first step. And then, it's sort of, it's the difference between going from a first date to getting married to, having some steps along the way that allow you to build trust and make sure there's the right fit here before anybody is all in.
Well, it also makes the client realize that your time is valuable. And, I can imagine a lot of designers and people in your industry will spend, 30 hours putting a pitch deck together and never get the job. And so really they're just wasted 30 hours of their time when they could have just, figured that out by saying, hey, our initial consult's $2,500 or $5,000 or however much, it needs to be. And then that gets rid of the headache in the process from the get-go.
Yeah, it's true. And it's funny because it seems a little bit counterintuitive, because as you're, especially for like young creative people out there or whatever, who are just selling or doing our best to sell, it's really difficult to have this idea that your time is actually worth that money. And it's fun, I'm just sitting here reflecting on my own career while you're talking about this idea of charging for that initial meeting. And I mean, I've worked in agencies that we've spent 60, 70, $100,000 on pitches to just lose them, or on RFPs and things like this. And, and the process is really built to kind of, I don't know, screw over creative agencies. Basically, it makes them, really flesh out all their best thoughts and do all this stuff kind of for free. And then you can pick and choose the one you like best and then not, and not pay for the others. And so I think that this is a really refreshing attempt, or like an evolution of sort of agency as normal, and I really like this thing that you're doing. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the points you guys were starting to hit on there that I think is so key here is when we used to do this for free, it was really hard to get a CEO to show up to that meeting and give you their attention. And all of a sudden you put a price tag on it, and the senior leadership, the decision makers are there because they got some skin in the game. They're taking you more seriously. And ultimately, probably what you wind up selling in the end is going to be a higher price tag, because you're not negotiating with, a junior level person. You have the decision maker saying, this is important and we're going to do this right.
I like that.
I think that's great. Well, so let's talk a little bit about you were saying that one of the primary things that you guys do is content around thought leadership and things like this. This is become one of those things that has become wildly popular. A lot of people are trying to get in on the content marketing game. So there are a lot of people writing articles, publishing things, doing all this kind of stuff. But I wanted to ask you a couple things about that. First of all, I mean, do you think there's still room in the content marketing space to grow? Is there becoming an oversaturation of stuff, or how do you separate the wheat from the chaff? And then finally, how do you sort of promote this stuff? How do you get these things out there? I understand personal blogs and things like this, but how do you actually generate traffic and ultimately an ROI off of doing that kind of work?
Yeah. So your first question, yes, I think there's absolutely plenty of room still for content. And I totally see where your question comes from. And the reality is, as the volume of content grows out there in the digital space, there's the amount of garbage content is just growing at even a faster pace, because everybody's like, all right, I got to do content. Let's just spit out a bunch of whatever. Right. But, the place to differentiate yourself is if you can pull the expertise from your team, from the true subject matter experts, focus less on volume and more on super high quality stuff that is, going to really resonate with the most important people at the exact types of companies that you're trying to reach. It's becoming harder and harder to win the search engine optimization game. And so whereas 10 years ago, I might have said, yeah, write a few articles around the most important keywords that are for the most important people. And soon you'll start ranking and for some companies that's still going to work, but as the saturation of content grows, it's becoming harder to win that game in the short term. So I think, you have to approach it as, SEO is the long play. That's the long game in a lot of ways, but you need this base of content to, build equity in your website, to teach the search engines that you're a great source of information around very specific topics for specific people. But then you got to pair that with things that are more proactive in nature. So it's so easy to target these days. You can put a little paid media budget behind a really great piece of content that you wrote or filmed, whatever medium you're using, and say, tell LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube or whatever social platform your customers maybe use, and say, hey, show this to people who fit these characteristics and those people only. Show this to design engineers from mid-size manufacturing companies on the Eastern Seaboard with these job titles, or whatever. It's and that's how you can amplify the content. And I think the difference between advertising now in the digital space and 5 or 10 years ago is, you got to move away from the message that's all about you and focus on that exceptional content, and then just getting it in front of as many of the right people as possible. So that's kind of my answer to that.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I like that quality versus quantity idea. I think especially now in sort of our instant gratification society, this idea of just keep churning is kind of pervasive out there, but I think it's a little bit refreshing to think of it as quality over quantity again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've mentioned keywords a few times. So like doing the research and finding, what keywords fit for your client. Can you break down how you figure that out and then how you implement those keywords into whatever you're doing? Is it hashtags? Is it the you use the key phrase or keywords in the paragraphs that you're writing and then put them through the article? What's the actual use of the keywords and how do you define what they are?
Sure. So I'll preface this by saying that I personally would not consider myself a search engine optimization expert. I know plenty about it. I've done plenty of it, but it's the strategy team that I've built under me that is really, they're the true experts in it. But the idea is this, if you want to rank organically in Google searches for I think what you do is you start with, again, a focus on the right types of companies and the people inside those companies. And you say, what do these people care about? What are the problems they're experiencing? What are the objectives that they're trying to achieve? What are the questions they're commonly asking on sales calls? And the chances are they're probably looking for these same types of things in a Google search, right? A majority of people are going to go to Google first, especially early on as they're trying to, figure out what they need to find. So if you can start with the problem or the question or the thing you think they care about, and then you can conduct, a process of identifying, what keywords would somebody likely use here. Then you use, Google's keyword planner. There's so many tools out there that are free, some paid, that will let you sort of, identify more specifically the volume of search around a specific keyword, how competitive that keyword is, meaning like, do you have a chance to rank for this thing anyway if we wrapped a piece of content around it? And then you make your decisions that way. So, I think something to consider is that, think about me, for example, I co-own a marketing agency, right? I'm never going to rank for marketing agency or digital marketing agency or your lead generate. Like there are too many of us out there, and it would be foolish to think that, I'm going to all of a sudden rise to the top there. But when I think about, marketing for manufacturers or industrial marketing strategy, now we're getting more specific. There's less people searching for that, but they're the right people. If somebody's looking for that, they're going to be much more relevant to me specifically. So you kind of have to think about that for your own business, and not only in terms of those sort of brand level or, thinking about the type of company you are, but zero in on specific things that your customers care about. For us, it's lead generation. So using keywords related to lead generation, but matching them up with, manufacturing related keywords, it could be a strategy.
Interesting. So it's more the more narrow you get, the better results you get out of it. So if you're so broad and I'm a marketing agency and you're typing in marketing as a hashtag or this as a hashtag and that, and it's broad, it's actually kind of not doing anything for you because there's too many fish in the pond, for example. Yeah,
exactly. Right? I think that's definitely true. The way to look at it is or the question to ask yourself is, would you rather have 10,000 random website visitors or a few hundred of them that are perfect? It's, the same thing goes inside the social channels. You want a whole bunch of followers who are just sort of generic, or do you want the ones who are really the right people for the right companies, but in a smaller number? I'd take the latter any day.
Niche marketing. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it makes perfect sense. And one of the things you guys list out on your website is that, to be a perfect customer for Gorilla 76, you need to be interested in sustainable growth strategies versus this instant gratification. And I think it's sort of related to what we're describing here, talking about, with SEO being one example and social being another, but this idea of your 1,000 true fans or whatever it is, that it's important to have those core people. I think you are pushing that idea with your, charging for your upfront meetings and things like that. You're doing ostensibly the same thing, right? You're not available to everyone. And I think it's interesting because this is a problem I've seen in a lot of young agencies, especially design agencies and things, where they really try hard to be all things to all people, and even in our agency, we're guilty of that for a long time. And it does make it really difficult to find clients because who's your client? Well, everyone's your client. Well, you could never have a big enough marketing budget to reach everyone. It's just, not doable. So this concept of refining your message and niching down a little bit, I think is really good information for people.
So what kind of marketing results should manufacturers or people who are marketing be measuring? What's the factors involved with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd answer this question differently now than I would have a few years ago, because the reality is everything's becoming measurable, and that's good in a lot of ways, but it's also creating this sort of symptom that I would describe as marketing nearsightedness, where sometimes you become so focused on attributing results to every single thing that you're doing that you kind of lose sight of the big picture. And so, for example, a lot of the companies that we work with, sell, the sales cycle is really long for their customers. They sell something that, they might start a conversation with a prospect, and the sale might be completed 6 months later, or even a couple of years later in some cases. And so to think that, we're going to implement a new marketing program, and we're going to, we need within 6 months or 12 months to have, attributed X amount of revenue or seen some level of ROI on those investments, in a lot of cases doesn't really make sense, because it takes some time to ramp that program up. And then your sales cycle itself might be 6 or 12 months. Of course, you're not going to see revenue from the thing that you did, at the very beginning or over those first few months. So, the way I think to look at it is, you absolutely have to have, leading and trailing metrics. So, if you can start with, this is our target, this is where this is our new customer acquisition target or our revenue target. And we want to start hitting these numbers by X date, which aligns with how long our sales cycle is, and then work backwards from there. So maybe within the next 2 years, you want to be able to attribute, 10 new customers or 2 million in revenue to a marketing program. Well, how many opportunities do you need to generate, or active quotes do you need to generate to get there based on your close rate? And then you kind of keep stepping backwards and say, well, how many sales qualified leads do we need to generate, like actual good leads, in order to generate that many active quotes? And how much website traffic / engagements with new prospects through outbound methods or through, inbound, but through paid media, would we need to get to generate that many sales qualified leads? So that's the way to sort of look at your funnel numerically. But I think you just have to put that filter on it and say, we know that there's going to be a ramp up period here, and make sure you're hitting those further up the funnel metrics along the way, so that you're going in the right direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You mentioned inbound versus outbound and paid marketing, and you actually have a tool for this on your website. But can you maybe define those a little bit better for us, so our listeners have a better understanding of that? Sure.
So inbound marketing, you can think of as people out there who largely probably don't know who you are, but they know they need something that you do, whether it's a type of product or solution, or they're just trying to get a question answered that you would be capable of answering. They're out there Google searching things, and you want them to find you because they find your expertise or the solution that is on your website is going to resonate with them, and it's going to lead to conversation, them filling out a form or downloading something and in exchange for some contact information. So inbound is a great way to get found by people who, need something, but they don't know you yet. Inbound's generally speaking, is a longer term play, though. You're not going to win the search engine optimization game overnight. There's no magic button you push or some fee you pay, and so that you can start, you can move to the top of a Google search by next week. The reality is you have to build authority for your website. You have to teach the search engines that you're the best source of information. And that comes through filling your site with amazing content for a specific type of person that you're trying to reach. And then building credibility through links from other credible sources to your website. If you do it the right way, it's going to take time. It's going to, I say it's the sustainable, play, because, once you can build authority for your site, well, then it's a matter of just maintaining it. It's like owning real estate in the search engines as opposed to, say, paid media. You're renting it. If you're running pay-per-click ads with Google, well, when you turn your budget off, your visibility goes away entirely. But there's value in that too, because it can drive short-term results. It can be a good supplemental way to drive results along with your inbound strategy. It's just that in the earliest stages of a new marketing initiative, a lot of times you might have to invest more in a paid media budget because you're just not going to have that visibility organically through inbound. So I think when I talk about sustainable, I'm talking about building an inbound machine over time, fast results to pair with that. I'm talking about putting a paid media budget on top of that, and probably doing some direct marketing too, where you say, I'm going to directly market to people that have this job title from this type of company and deliver a message directly to them.
Yeah, good deal. I like that. You also recently published an article about writing effective emails for essentially cold calling your client. Can you talk about some practices that you would use in that? I've actually struggled with this myself. I hate reaching out on a phone. I can kind of like instantly hey, you might be having a problem with this, but have you thought of this? But writing an email is so, it's either going to work or it's not. Are there some practices that you would suggest for writing a cold call email?
Well, and to tie that back to the prior question, email would be an example of outbound marketing.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, you could say, all right, well, in addition to our inbound strategy and running some paid media to, a very specific type of prospect, you could build a list of, say, I don't know, 10 or 50 or 100 people that fit the description of your ideal customer profile and directly reach out to them. So the wrong way to do it is probably a good lead into the right way. You probably get these emails all the time. We all do, where it's just somebody trying to sell you a service. Software companies are notorious for it. But people sending you emails, with just a long range of all the stuff they can do and you should buy from them and why they're awesome, and bullet points with capabilities. And we know what we do with those emails 99% of the time, right? We delete them, we mark them as spam, we ignore them, we unsubscribe. Yet this is just the way people do it. And it's kind of mind blowing. So, the recommendation that I have, sort of the strategy is very similar to everything we've been talking about today, which is, trying to understand what your best prospects and customers care about, and then creating value in those emails. If you could focus on the 5 biggest problems that your best customers commonly have, and then you could, for each one of those, film a short video or write a piece of content. Use whatever medium you're most comfortable in that you think will also resonate with them. And now what you can do is you deliver, an email where the subject line is, a few ways to address fill in the blank, or, how we see fill in the job title dealing with fill in the problem. And then you use the email for, the first thing I like to do inside the body of an email is try to make a personal connection. You do a little bit of research on this person before you reach out to them. I think the example in my article I used was, I grew up in Milwaukee, and I would start an email to somebody else from Milwaukee with, something about, hey, the NBA is starting back up. Hopefully Bucks are the best team in the NBA so far this year, right? Like hopefully they can keep it going. Just something to make a personal human to human connection. Everybody sounds like a robot in these emails. So how can you break through that? And about 3 minutes of research on LinkedIn or just Google searching the person's name plus their company, you could probably learn something that could make for a more natural human intro. And then you use the rest of the email to deliver a little nugget from, say, this article you wrote or a video you filmed about this problem that they're likely experiencing, because you hear this all the time from other people in their job title from their type of company. And so 90% of the email is helpful in nature. And then you end with something like, would it be valuable to have a quick chat about, how I see other companies like yours dealing with this thing, or something like that, right? So now it's all about them. It's about what they care about instead of being about you, because nobody cares about you. They don't care about you until they believe you can address the issues that they're dealing with.
Yeah, I like that little bit of research, the personal connection on LinkedIn. I can't tell you how many times I get a follow request or whatever, and then it's a copy and paste email with blah, 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 blah about my business, and this is what I can do for you, and da, da, da. And I never even hardly read it or reply. And so it's nice and refreshing when you get those emails with, hey, noticed you're in Seattle. What's going on with the Chaz zone? Stuff
Right.
like that. It really separates you from the rest of the herd. So
Absolutely. People want to talk to people, right? Not companies. They don't want to talk to companies or robots. They want to talk to people.
Well, and that's the thing. I think it's so critical is that, just understanding the importance of sort of interhuman relationships in this stuff, because we are overwhelmed with that stuff, these emails or the messages in LinkedIn and things like that. I mean, all day. And it's funny because, you're not the first marketer we've spoken to that has sort of this message, right? You need to be authentic and you need to treat your people like humans. And you need to, this I dare call it common information, right? Mm-hmm. But nobody's doing it. And so it's like, so I don't know if it's people are just caught up in the old ways of doing things or what it is, but you really can stand out by just being human. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. It's such a logical thing, but like you said, it's not that many embrace it.
Well, and think about it's your birthday, right? How many messages do you get on Facebook from people? Yeah. Happy birthday, da, da, da. And it's all, the same HBD, whatever. And you got 50 comments on it, but how many people actually reach out and call you and have a conversation on your birthday? It really sets you apart. It's a huge defining difference when people do that.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And you think about the way you feel when you get one of those, it's refreshing, right? And so you feel like this person actually thought about me, not just noticed that pop up in their Facebook notifications. So they clicked the automated message and hit send,
Yeah. And then go through the rest of their friends who have birthdays that day and do the same thing again.
Exactly. Yep.
So it's defining little moments like that separate you.
So one thing that we've talked about a little bit throughout the topic, throughout this show is this idea of sort of fast results versus sustainable success, and sort of this idea of, longer burn ideas like thought leadership and SEO and some of these other things. I wondered if you could talk about, we had a thing on your bio sheet about 7 core elements of industrial marketing strategy. But I wondered about those 7 core elements as it pertains to creating a balance in marketing, weighing fast results versus sustainable success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we kind of created this platform or sort of this infrastructure that we call 7 core elements. I don't know, it must have been about 3 years ago when we decided to sort of take a look at all the pieces that we see that when it's working for a client. What are all the things that seem to be there, present and optimized and sort of working in sync? And then we broke it down into these 7 things, which are positioning, your website foundation, your marketing sales technology stack, your content strategy, your lead generation strategy, your pipeline management strategy, and then your sort of data analysis systems. And we got all these things working together. And nobody's got it all right, but you sort of have to start by auditing where are you strong and where are you weak, and trying to get the pieces that are hurting a little bit more, elevate those and get them working better. But when you look at those, it's the first few, like positioning. What is the perception of your business in the minds of your customers? That's how I would define positioning. And you kind of have to get that right first. You need to think about, one you guys said earlier, everybody sort of tries to be everything to everybody. And when you do that, all you're doing is delivering a generic message that, might kind of resonate with a whole bunch of people, but it doesn't really resonate super well with anybody, or at least in a deep level, which is, the reason why, like for us, we specialized in helping mid-sized manufacturers achieve very specific things. When people see that message and they're the right person, it immediately, their eyes light up. I hear it on calls all the time, right? So positioning yourself, it's really got to come first. Who are we trying to reach, and what message are we trying to deliver to those individuals? And then then you get into these pieces like your website foundation. Like if you want to be able to facilitate online lead generation and attract those people that we've just identified, there are certain things you got to get right. There has to be, you've got to have the core pieces in place, but you have to have a lead generation system there. You have to have best SEO practices in place. So a lot of times there's these foundational things that you want to get there. You want to get the messaging right before you start driving the world there, right? Because if you start driving people to a website that's not equipped for lead generation and you're broadcasting the wrong message to them, they're gone in 2 seconds. So I think that's why that has to be there. The technology stack, I'm talking about marketing automation software. I'm talking about a CRM on the sales side. You need the right tools to be able to analyze what are people doing on your site after somebody fills out a form. What pages are they looking at? And that's going to help you identify which people are maybe showing buying intent versus which are just, kind of there browsing, which can help influence the decisions you make about who to spend more time with, both on the marketing and sales front. So talking about, long-term or the sustainable stuff, I think you need those core pieces in place to build a sustainable system. And then you can start worrying more about getting results. And that's where, you develop a base of content. You start using, say, paid social channels like LinkedIn and Facebook to target specific people and get that content in front of them and start, generating engagement that way. But you need that foundation in place if you expect to build a sustainable machine.
Like that.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it is interesting too. It's one of these things, and maybe you've observed some differences now during like COVID and all this stuff. But one of the things that I keep discovering that is kind of, I don't know, almost puts me at ease a little bit is understanding that by and large, even though things have gone kind of crazy in terms of our global economies and all this stuff, like the fundamental truths are still the fundamental truths. The fact is that yes, you have to be positioned. Maybe it's more important now than ever that you're positioned, but well before COVID, you needed to have your positioning ironed out. And now in the post-COVID world, you still have to. So, for people who are, scrambling or running around, with their hair on fire, looking for, how do I do business now during COVID or now that things have slowed down, we might have to be a little bit more disciplined or work a little harder. But I think the good news is that fundamentally, not a lot has changed.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with that. I think that, I think in a time like this, your positioning is that much more important, to really know who you're best at serving and deliver a message that resonates because, I think it's harder to get a message across right now. People are I don't want to use the word distracted, but they've got more important things to deal with, right? People are concerned. They're dealing with more personal life problems than usual, and business owners, and they're just trying to figure out how to survive in a lot of cases. So it's harder to get a message through, and the more focused you are on your audience and the better you understand them, the more easily you can deliver a message that actually resonates.
Yeah. And I think going back to our discussion earlier about sort of guerrilla tactics being something sort of, of our generation is, I think, maybe now more, excuse me, now more than ever, while budgets are a little bit lower or maybe have gone away altogether, and basically we've got to focus on these core principles and these, foundational aspects of our business in order to sort of be successful. We've got to be smart about the way we're doing things and serving up information in a way that we could do it with maybe less money and less media buy and less, all these things that normally, in a better time or in a simpler time, we would have been much more able to throw money at different things, where now we have to maybe get a little more bootstrappy and a little more guerrilla.
Yeah. All good points.
Lots of times companies have problems with their marketing and their sales people going in two different routes. Mm-hmm. One of your talking points on your sheet is bringing them together and making sure they are on the same page. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how that works and getting everyone aligned in the same direction?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Other people who are, leading agencies or strategy people in the marketing world, like the ones who deal with, say, software companies or professional services, a lot of times what I hear is they don't have this problem. Marketing and sales are aligned. They work together. They don't have trouble getting buy-in from senior leadership to get these two parts of the organization working together. But in my world, and probably in a lot of industries, especially those that may be a little more lagging in terms of, adapting marketing technology and things, I just see this big sort of, these silos with marketing and sales. Like sales is out there knocking on doors and prospecting and doing things the way they've been doing it for 20 years. And as far as they're concerned, marketing is, there to make brochures and make the website look good and create materials to support trade shows. And they're not really working together toward the same goal, which is just such a missed opportunity, because both of these parts of your organization are there to generate business. Marketing should be producing opportunities, and sales should be taking them through to close, really, and marketing should be supporting those, that all the way along the way. So, I think the best way to, if you're starting a new program, the best thing to do is to get the key stakeholders in a room, get them focused on, in agreement about who you're focusing on. Make sure your VP of sales and whoever heads up marketing and your president of your company, like you're all on the same page about what type of company you're trying to pursue, and who the people are inside those organizations you need to reach. And then you craft your content and your messaging all around that, so that you're not going in a million different directions. And then when you launch a campaign, like, for example, let's say you're launching you produce a bunch of content for this type of audience. Now you're arming your sales team with that content to use in their outbound process. Your marketing is using that content on your website and optimizing it for search, and probably using it in paid media campaigns, amplifying the reach of that content in front of specific people. And then, maybe weekly or every other week, marketing and sales they're regrouping, and they're saying, okay, let's look at how all this is performing. Let's look at which people that we're sending these outbound emails to, which of them are actually opening these emails and engaging with this content we're sending them. Which pieces of that content are getting the most engagement, and are there next steps that marketing and sales could take together to say, help further engage the people who are giving us the most attention, who seem to be showing some buying intent, for example. So it becomes this team effort where marketing can help feed real-time information to sales, and they can make decisions together about the best way to move these leads closer to becoming opportunities that would become customers.
I like that.
So one thing I wanted to talk to you about too, is we're starting to wind down here. We've talked or hit a few points along the way that I think are extremely relevant, especially to young agencies and companies who are just building. I happen to come from an agency background too, so for me, it's sort of near and dear to my heart. But at the same time, I understand that this could apply to many businesses, not just agency type. But I wanted to talk to you about firing customers and when to know when to let go. I think probably, and you may be able to speak to this from your experience, but as you guys niched down into this industrial marketing space, you probably had to shed a few people. You may have made decisions. Our best clients were in these spaces, and that ultimately led to your niching. But I wonder if you could talk a little about making the decision to terminate the relationship between you and a customer. Because it's not always negative. I mean, it might make sense to let somebody go because there's a fight or maybe a personality conflict or something. But I think there are other reasons for doing it. For example, niching down. But could you talk a little bit about that and just sort of your experience in that, and any pointers you might have for a small company growing and when to shed the bad customers?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a tough decision to make, for anybody, because you've got a customer that, and we've gone through this a few times where we've had customers who have been, they've been on retainer with us for 4 or 5 years or more even. We've gone through some of that this year, and the reality is, they evolve and you evolve, and sometimes the fit's just not there anymore. And you look at the work you're doing and you say, this isn't really even the stuff we're best at doing, and are we really creating value for them? are they even profitable to us? Because now we're doing work that we're not really doing for other clients, and we're not that efficient at doing it. And probably somebody else could do this work at a lower cost for them and get better results. And so we've made that decision a handful of times along the way. I think it's okay to keep bringing these clients along as long as they're getting value. That's more of an ethical decision that you need to make for yourself. Are you actually creating value for these people? And if the answer is yes, then maybe you keep going until you can afford to say, okay, maybe it's time to cut ties now. But we've had that situation. But I think from a business perspective, you have to look at these customers and say, are we making money? Are we really making money? Or are we, there's a marketing agency consultant named Drew McClellan. I don't know if you guys know him. He runs the Agency Management Institute and a good podcast for agency owners, but he always sort of talks about, are you paying for the privilege to do work for a client? And at that point, you have to look at it and say, we probably need to reallocate the resources that we have devoted to this client elsewhere, because we're not even making money serving them. We're just burning through our team's time and collecting a check at super low margin or maybe actually losing money there. So I think when you have the thing to do is just to have the transparent conversation with the client and say, okay, I think we've reached a point here where I don't know if we're doing our best work for you. I don't know if the fit's really there. And when we've had those conversations, the clients usually appreciate it. That's what we've found, because we're being honest with them. And what we always do is we come to the table with some solutions. We say, if we go in different directions here, we think these guys over here would be a good fit for you. And in a lot of cases, we've vetted other agencies that make more sense for them, or maybe it's even a freelancer. Like, do you really need to be spending this fee monthly with an agency? We think you could do it at half the cost with this freelancer and frankly get the same results. So I think that's one way you can do it is just help them figure out what the solution is. So that way you're not leaving them out to dry.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And they probably appreciate it when you have a solution to their, instead of saying, hey, see you later. It's nice to come to the table with, hey, here's Joe and he can do this. Mm-hmm. Maybe he's a better fit for you.
Yep.
So we're about at that time. Can you tell people where they can find you, the best place to reach out, and any last minute shots you want to throw in there?
Sure. Yeah. So I always direct people to our learning center, which is where we kind of practice what we preach. We publish content there at least once a week. It's now that we're doing a lot more podcasts as guests and launching our own as well, it's probably more like twice a week. But our content is there for B2B companies and specifically manufacturers, but I think anybody in a B2B space selling complex solutions is going to get value from that content. So that's gorilla76.com/learn. So gorilla like the animal, GORILLA 76.com/learn. And then if you would like to, reach out to me personally, I'd find me on LinkedIn. You can search for Joe Sullivan Gorilla and you'll find me. And yeah, I also post a lot of content there and tried to build a network and answer questions for anybody who's looking to ask a question the best I can. So
I would also recommend people go to your YouTube channel. You have a ton of good content there as well. I watched a few of your videos earlier today and would say that that's a good resource as well. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Joe. We really appreciate your time and the time you took out of your day to do this with us. I guess thanks to everybody who tunes in to the show this week and every week. And we'll look forward to seeing you all next time.